Hello, everyone, and welcome to Proline. I'm John Cranton in Las Vegas, joined by Jeff Saad, who runs Las Vegas Sports Services. We're going to take a look at the 2013 SEC football preview. We got returning starters, we got some betting trends, and even some early lines on some marquee games. You know, the SEC has won 7 consecutive national titles, the powerhouse conference in the nation. The last non-SEC team to win the whole thing was Texas. That was in the 05-06 season under Mac Brown. Last year, Florida and Georgia were 7-1 in the SEC East. South Carolina was right behind at 6-2. Those 3 teams won 11 and 12 ball games between the 3 of them. And then in the SEC East, you had Bama at 13-1, 7-1 in the conference. Of course, they won the whole thing, beating Notre Dame. And you had LSU and A&M were also 6-2 in the SEC. Bama beat Georgia in that big SEC title game, 32-28 as an 8-point favorite. Then they destroyed Notre Dame 42-14 as a 9.5-point favorite. So, Jeff, let's start with the SEC East, and you can have the honors with the defending champs. How do they look?
Well, Alabama, that's the West. Alabama, they have 6 on offense, 8 on defense, 13-1 last year, 7-7 against the spread. They've won 3 of the last 4. They could become the first team ever to have 4 titles in 5 years. Offensively, they're pretty much set. They have to replace 3 stars in the offensive line, but with Saban's recruiting, it doesn't make much difference anymore. He just reloads every year. Quarterback A.J. McCarron had 30 TDs, 3 interceptions. Sophomore running back T.J. Yeldon over 1,100 yards last year, 6.3 yards per carry, and then we have wide receiver Amari Cooper, 1,000 receiving yards. The receiving core returned just about everybody. Kenny Bell, DeAndre Wright, Chris Black, he's returning from an injury. The linebacking and defensive linebacking core is going to be one of the best in the nation, led by C.J. Mosley. Cornerback is good shape. They got Dion Ballou, one of my favorite names in college football, Clinton Dix, and Vinny Cinceri. I think you can never underestimate Nick Saban. I think he has a very good chance of winning another national championship. The schedule looks like it starts off at Virginia. It's at Virginia Tech, but it's being played in Atlanta, and they should beat Virginia Tech in that game. Then they have the big revenge game at Texas A&M, and then they have Colorado State, and the rest of the SEC schedule. They have also played Georgia State. I'm not sure why that's. Can't wait to see the points spread in that game, but. I think it's another 12-1 season for Alabama, maybe even 13-0, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win another BCS championship. And I see a line here. They played in the LSU in that game. It would be revenge for LSU, but right now Alabama is minus 11.5 against LSU playing at home. I wouldn't go against Bama in that game, and the total is 39.5. I think you have an opinion on that one, John.
Yeah, that's one of those games where both teams are going to run. You got the powerhouse defenses. Last year's game slipped under the total, and it's often a low-scoring game, like a 17-10. So I wouldn't be surprised to see neither team get 20 in that one. Another team in the SEC West that may be able to overtake Bama. Hey, if you can't do it with defense the way LSU does, what about trying flinging it down the field? That's Texas A&M. Boy, the Aggies really stunned everybody last year. Coach Kevin Sumlin, a terrific recruiter. He's a proponent of wide-open attacking offenses. And the Aggies are one of the best in the SEC and in the nation. They averaged 44.5 points. That was 4th in the country. 316 yards passing. That was 14th. And for good measure, 242 yards rushing. That was 11th in the country. So they could kill you on offense in so many ways, as Bama found out. And the good news is they have 6 starters back on offense, 5 on defense, 11-2 straight up, 8-5 against the spread, 6-2 in the SEC. And, of course, Johnny Manziel returns 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, winning the Heisman. He exploded on the scene as a freshman. 1,409 yards rushing, 21 rushing touchdowns, averaging 7 yards per carry, just an electric weapon. But he's not alone. They have number 1 wide receiver, sophomore Mike Evans back. He had over 1,100 yards receiving. One concern is that offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury left, so you got running backs coach Clarence McKinney. He's stepping in to call the plays now. The A&M defense, they didn't allow a lot of points last year, just 28 points per game. They did give up a lot of yards. That was 390 per game. And they do lose some key linebackers. And the secondary, they finished 12th in the SEC in pass defense. So that is the weak link of this team. They can score points, but you can throw on them, and they can give up some points. And when you look at their losses, played a very good game against LSU, but lost at home 24-19. And the game against Florida, they lost 20-17, so they were not far away from an unbeaten season. And then when they went to play Oklahoma in the bowl, it was a massacre, 41-13. They rolled in addition to that big win over Alabama. Now, the Aggies only going to play 4 road games this season. However, they're going to be playing at LSU late in November. But the big one is going to be early, September 14th against Alabama. They're going to be at home. But Alabama is a 6-point favorite right now with a total of 54.5. I think it's a good number on both the side and the total. A very difficult game to call. But certainly will be a marquee game to watch in September. All right, Jeff, how about LSU? Are they rebuilding or retooling?
Well, for most teams it would be rebuilding, but for a team like LSU, it's retooling because they always have these great recruiting years. They only have 3 starters back on defense, but especially on the defensive line, that loses everybody. But the players they have stepping in still have a lot of experience. They have 7 returning starters on offense. Last year, 10-3 straight up, 5-8 against the spread. Their offense just couldn't come up with enough big plays to win a few more games. They had 3 losses by a combined 13 points. Florida, Bama, and Clemson in that bowl game. They blew the game against Clemson in the bowl game. They should have won that game. They almost lost to Auburn and Arkansas also, and they won at Texas A&M 24-19. But the offense needs to improve here. There's going to be more pressure on the offense now too because the defense is fairly young. Last year the ground game averaged 170 yards per game, and they get Alfred Blue and Kenny Hilliard back. They combined for 734 yards. Passing game 200 yards per game last year. Zach Mettenberger is the quarterback. He was inconsistent. He had 12 TDs, 7 interceptions. Well, he played his best game against Alabama. He threw for 298 yards. Wide receiver Jarvis Landry, last 5 games last year, caught 33 passes for 357 yards and 4 TDs. And they get junior wide receiver Odell Beckham back. He had 713 yards. So all the top 4 receivers are back. Last year they lost 11 players to the NFL, and of course, no matter who you are, that's going to hurt a little bit. But I still think LSU will. I have them for 3rd in the SEC West. The secondary, the schedule was tough. They got Florida A&M at home, plus road games at Georgia and Alabama. They're on a 3-7 against the spread run because they were overvalued last season. That probably won't happen this year. They're 4-2 under the total of the last 6 games. But I'll go with LSU to finish 3rd in the SEC West and look for them to go 9-3.
Okay, I'm going to take a look at the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Very interesting team, and they were a bit of a disappointment last year, just 4-4 in the SEC. But again, overall, 8 wins, 5 losses, 6-7 against the spread. Dan Mullen has done a terrific job. He's 24-15 the last 3 years, and there's quite a bit to like about the Bulldogs for this season. It's largely a run-oriented attack with the triple option. However, they were actually pretty good balance last season, and there's a lot to like about this offense. First of all, you get senior quarterback Tyler Russell back, 24 touchdown passes, 10 interceptions. He's got running back Ladarius Perkins in the backfield, who had just over 1,000 yards rushing. And the passing game lost its top 4 targets, but they do have 4 offensive linemen back. So this ground game for the Bulldogs is going to be outstanding. And in the wide receiver core, they pick up a junior college transfer in Jeremy Chappelle. He's 6'2", and he was a headliner recruit of a pretty good wide receiver haul that they had coming in that Mullen brought in. So this offense looks balanced and very good again. And then the defense is kind of underrated, under the radar. Very good defensive line. You got a unit that allowed just 23.3 points per game last year. That was 34th in the nation. 7 of the top 8 defensive linemen and 6 of the top 7 linebackers return. New faces in the secondary, but overall there's quite a bit of talent, including a junior college transfer in Justin Cox. He's a big kid to be playing in the secondary at 6'3". And with a run-oriented attack and an underrated defense, it's not surprising they were 7-4-1 under the total last year. I could see that continuing. And we're going to see how good this team is early on because they're opener August 31st. It's going to be against Oklahoma State. The game is being played in Houston. And I see it as a relatively even matchup, an SEC school against an Oklahoma State team that can be soft defensively at times. And yet the early number is the wide-open offense of Oklahoma State, a 14-point favorite. Can't agree with that. I think this Mississippi State defense is pretty good, a little bit underrated, so I would think that's a much closer game than the early line suggests. All right, Jeff, how about the other Mississippi school? What do they have in store?
Well, they returned 8 on offense, 7 on defense. Last year, 7-6 straight up, 10-3 against the spread. That's another situation. We have a team that was undervalued last year that should even out this year. Coach Hugh Freeze done a tremendous job. His offense averaged 31.5 points last year, 250 yards passing, 174 yards rushing, and they returned what could be the best wide receiving core in the conference. Offensive line returns 4 starters. Quarterback Bo Wallace, 22 TDs, 17 interceptions last year. They have junior wide receiver Dante Moncrief. He had 10 TDs, and also senior running back Jeff Scott, 846 yards. So things look good on the offensive side of the ball for Ole Miss this year. Linebacking core is also strong on the defense there behind sophomore Denzo Kemdichi, and they also recruited his brother, who was one of the top recruits in the country for defensive end. They're overloaded at defensive end. In addition to Kemdichi, they've got C.J. Johnson and Channing Ward. Defensive tackle, they're not quite as deep. Last year they allowed 27.6 points per game, mostly because of a poor secondary. This year there'll be more experience there. I think they get Nick Brazel back, who left the team for a while for academic reasons, but I think he's back now. Around a current 4-0 run over the total, mostly because they had good offense and suspect secondary. They have a tough schedule this year. They open with 4 out of 5 road games. They play at Vandy, then they're home against Southeast Missouri State, then they're at Texas, at Bama, at Auburn, and then they have to host Texas A&M and LSU. So the schedule could be their biggest problem this year. On August 29th, they open against Vanderbilt. Ole Miss is -4 at Vanderbilt. That should be, right now, I have no opinion of that game. That should be a pretty good game, and hard to go against Vanderbilt at home. They're getting 4 points, but then again, Ole Miss looks pretty good this year, especially on offense. So I'll go with Ole Miss because of the schedule, maybe eke out a 7-5 season, and I'll pick them for 4th in the SEC West, John.
Okay, let's jump to the SEC East. You want to talk about under-the-radar teams. I'm going to look at South Carolina Gamecocks. I mean, last year it was Florida and Georgia in this division, and South Carolina slipped behind those two at 6-2. And yet, when the regular season ended, South Carolina was 8th in the nation. They had a great season despite finishing 6-2 in the SEC, 11-2 overall, straight up 8-5 against the spread. That's back-to-back 11-2 seasons for Steve Spurrier. And boy, he's going to have a lot of fun with this team on both sides of the ball. Start with the offense. He's got senior quarterback Connor Shaw back, 17 touchdowns, 7 picks, 67.5 completions, and he's got a very skilled backup quarterback in Dylan Thompson. He had 10 touchdowns and 10 interceptions and over 1,000 yards passing. You got a leading wide receiver, Bruce Ellington, back with 600 yards. 4 starters back on the offensive line, 6 overall. And Spurrier's offense last year, great balance, 31.5 points per game, 238 yards passing. And if you want to contend in this rugged SEC, nice to have balance on offense, but also some kind of strong defense. And boy, the South Carolina team is an absolute powerhouse on defense. You get 5 starters back to a defense that was 13th in the nation, allowing just 18.2 points per game. Secondary is terrific with Victor Hampton and Jimmy Legree. Defensive line is deep and loaded, led by star junior defensive end Jadeveon Clowney, one of the top players in the nation. Now take a look at the schedule. They kind of catch a break facing Georgia in week 2 as the Bulldogs are working in a new quarterback. And then they have a 3-game road trip in October. However, it's very manageable at Arkansas, Tennessee, and Missouri. And then November, there's really the 2 big games. The first one is November 16th. That'll be against Florida. It will be a revenge game as South Carolina was hammered at Florida last year, 44-11. The Gators, remember him coming back to the Swamp. And the early line on that game, South Carolina has home field this year. They are a 5-point favorite over the Gators. And then late November on the 30th, they are hosting rival Clemson. They are a 4.5-point favorite. South Carolina is at home. They only have 7 seniors on the Gamecocks. As good as I think they are for this year, maybe they're a year away. They've won 11 straight games at home, and they carry an 8-4 run. They're both straight up and against the spread. 8-4 ATS into the new season, 8-4 over the total, if you like to play totals. Speaking of South Carolina, Florida game, what can we expect, Jeff, from the Gators this season? Well,
Florida was a hard team for me to handicap last year because their offense was just so undependable. they did win that game in South Carolina, but that was mostly on turnovers and things. It wasn't really an offensive explosion in that game. They returned 4 on offense, 5 on defense. They were 11-2 last year, 7-6 against the spread. Will Muschamp, the coach, has said that he doesn't care how they win a game just so they win, but sooner or later you're going to have to outscore some people. Last year they had a dominant defense, 5th in the nation in points allowed. They lost 3 starters in the defense of the NFL. Linebackers concerned, secondary is loaded, and the defensive line adds Ronald Powell. He's a former number 1 prospect. He's returning from an ACL injury, and they also have defensive tackle Darius Cummings arriving from junior college. The offense needs to take a step up, though. It was all about running last year, 187 yards rushing. The passing game was 118th in the nation. You can only do that for so long without suffering the consequences. 3 starters are back on the offensive line, and sophomore running back Matt Jones is back, 275 yards, 5.3 yards per carry last year. And they had a good game against Florida State. 8 carries for 81 yards against Florida State. They have a freshman running back, Calvin Taylor. He's a top recruit. He ran for more than 2,400 yards in high school. Junior quarterback Jeff Driscoll, 12 TDs, 5 interceptions. He was adequate last year. He ran for 408 yards. But he needs to improve the passing game there. He had 5 interceptions, and 4 of them were thrown in the 2 losses, Georgia and Louisville. They only had 1 interception in the other 11 games. Florida is 50-9 straight up in the swamp there at home, or just 28-25-1 against the spread, and they're on a current 1-5 against the spread run. They have those road games at South Carolina and LSU, and then they have the Georgia game on November 2nd. They'll have to beat South Carolina and Georgia to win that East Division, but I'll pick them for second. I'll pick them for a 9-3 season in second place in the SEC East, John. Also on October 12th, Florida and LSU at LSU. LSU -4. Tough game. I think that the total is 41.5. I might lean toward the under in that game, and right now I have no opinion on the side, John.
Yeah, I see nothing but field goals that game. Let's make it 9-6, boring fest. Okay, I'm going to take a look at Tennessee, and here's a team that is not going to be in contention in anywhere in the SEC or for a bowl game. Off back-to-back 5-7 seasons, they were 4-8 against the spread last year, 1-7 in the SEC, which makes them 2-14 their last 16 SEC games. The only thing good about the Volunteers was their passing game, which was actually 15th in the nation with 315.6 yards passing per game. However, all kinds of changes taking place. The coach is out, and they have a first-year coach in Butch Jones. He did an outstanding job with Central Michigan and Cincinnati, basically following Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. And he's a proponent of wide-open offenses, but he doesn't have a quarterback. He's got to go with Justin Worley. He's going to be available, but he only threw 134 yards last year. The ground game of the Volunteers was actually pretty good, 160 yards per game. That was 62nd in the nation. And they actually have one of the best offensive lines in the SEC, as well as 4 starters back. You got running back Rajion Neal. He had 708 yards rushing, and they lost their top wideout. So with the tailbacks Neal and Marlon Lane, it's going to be, on paper, a very good rushing offense, but the passing game has a lot of work to do. And then there's the defense. Boy, this defense for the Vols just fell off the map. 35.7 points per game they allowed. The secondary was horrendous, 111th in the nation against the pass. They are rebuilding, obviously. With that passing offense and terrible defense, it's no surprise they're on a 10-2 run over the total, but I really have to question whether that's going to continue because this rebuilding offense I don't think is going to be that potent. I think they're going to have to lean on the ground game first before they develop their quarterback, and the defense at this point, based on what they're bringing in, it's not going to be much improved. So very difficult year as the Vols rebuild. How about Missouri, Jeff? Is Gary Pinkel ready to head back to the Big 12?
Yeah, they had a rude awakening there going to the SEC last year. But the main problem was James Franklin, the quarterback, kept getting injured. That might be another problem this year. He just seems to he just can't stay healthy. But still, they had big problems. They're going to the SEC. They were 5-7, 5-6-1 against the spread, only 2-6 in conference play. They returned 7 on offense, 6 on defense. Last year, the offense averaged 28.4 points, 218 yards passing, 138 yards rushing. Yes, Franklin has a deep receiving core. He's got Marcus Lucas there and Damian Washington, but still he's going to have to stay healthy for the Missouri to have any chance this year. Burke Spencer was their backup last year, but he was just average. Four starters returned the offensive line, and they got senior running back Henry Josie, who had a knee injury last year. He'll be back this year. He missed all last season. Defense allowed 28.4 points per game. Three of the top four returning tacklers, including E.J. Gaines, were in the secondary last year, so that was their strong point. They lost. They allowed 59 points to A&M. They gave up 41 to Georgia, 31 to South Carolina, 42 to Bama. So obviously the defense has to step up, and it's now they're now in the SEC. They need to improve a lot. The schedule is pretty easy here. They play Murray State, Toledo, Indiana, Arkansas State. Then they have 3 home games against an SEC play: Florida, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Missouri's 48-19 straight up, 28-31 against the spread in its last 67 home games. So under 500 against the spread at home. I look for Missouri to, because of that early, they have Austin Peay, UAB. They'll win those 2 games. They'll probably go for a 6-6 season, but they'll finish probably 6th in the SEC East. John, let's see if they have any. Do we have any games? Any lines in that game? I don't see any. But that's why I'm looking for Missouri. I think they'll finish toward the bottom in the SEC East, John.
Okay, another tough year there. I'm going to take a look at the Georgia Bulldogs. A lot of people thought that last year was really the Bulldogs' year with all the talent that they had returning, and they really came close to winning a national title. They dropped that SEC title game to Bama 32-28, and this is a team, the Bulldogs have been to the last 2 SEC title games, and while they're a little bit under the radar this year, their offense is going to be dynamite. They could make another trip to that title game. Senior quarterback Aaron Murray is back, 36 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 3,893 yards passing last year, and great balance. You got sophomore running back Todd Gurley back. He had over 1,300 yards, 6.2 yards per carry. You got sophomore running back Keith Marshall. He chipped in 759 yards. So this offense was potent with 37.8 points, 285 yards passing, and 182.6 yards rushing per game. And they also have senior wide receiver Marshall Mitchell, their second leading receiver. He is back with 572 yards. This Georgia Bulldog team is loaded on offense. Defense has been so dominant the last 2 years, allowing 20.6 and 19.6, but they lost just about everybody, only 3 starters back on defense. So they are rebuilding. This was the nation's 3rd-ranked pass defense last year, but again, a lot of new faces on the defensive side of the ball, so that's really going to be the key. And when you look at the schedule for Georgia, it really begins early. We're going to see how good this team is right off the bat. First 2 games of the year, August 31st, they're going to be at Clemson. They are a 3.5-point early favorite there. And then in week 2, September 7th, they'll be hosting South Carolina. They are a 4-point home favorite in that one. And that South Carolina game is a huge revenge game as the Gamecocks spanked Georgia last year 35-7. And if you want to throw in the LSU game, that's going to be played in September too. So that's 3 monster games that Georgia's going to be playing all by September 28th. If you like to play trends, Bulldogs have been fantastic on the road under Mark Richt. 45-17 straight up, 34-28 ATS. The last 2 years they've been 7-2 straight up, 5-4 ATS on the road. All right, Jeff, how about Vanderbilt, a surprise team in the SEC last year? Are they building something, or was that a fluke?
Well, Vanderbilt has 7 returning offense, 6 on defense. They won 9 games last year. It's the first time they won 9 games since 1915. They're 9-4 overall, 9-4 against the spread. Another undervalued team last year that will probably be overvalued this year or come back to the pack a little bit. James Franklin has done a tremendous job as coach at Vanderbilt. This is the best they've looked in since almost my lifetime. They ranked 5th in the league in total defense. They were 8th in total offense. They lost to Georgia. They got blown out of Georgia and lost to Florida 31-17. That was early in the season, and apparently they learned from it because they won the last 7 games. Offense averaged 30 points, 213 yards passing, 166 yards rushing per game. Their quarterback is going to be Wyoming transfer Austin Carter-Samuels. He was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year in 2009, although now he's coming to the SEC. The competition is going to be a little bit different here. They also have a redshirt freshman, Patton Robinette, who was going to we'll look at quarterback also. They have 3-star defensive ends, Walker May, Kyle Westman, and Caleb Azabricki. And they're a little weak at defensive tackle, though. The secondary is pretty solid. offense. They have the best pair of starting wide receivers in the conference. Some say Chris Boyd and Jordan Matthews. Great kicker, Kerry Spear made 20 out of 24 field goals last season. They're on a 6-0 straight up and against a spread run. They're 7-4 over the total of the last 11 games. I'm looking at the schedule here. They open with Mississippi, and then they go at Austin Peay. Oh no, they're hoping at home against Mississippi, Austin Peay, then go to South Carolina and at UMass, and then they play at home against UAB. So with that schedule, they could easily win another 9 games this year. But I'll go with Vanderbilt 8-4 and 4th place in the SEC East, John.
So you're saying that was the best season for Vanderbilt since William Howard Taft was in the White House?
Yeah. There's a line out in the Tennessee-Vandy game. That's always a big rivalry game. Vandy's -1 against Tennessee, and right now I would look at Vandy in that game.
I would agree with that. Well, perhaps there's hope for the Cubs yet if Vanderbilt can turn it around. Okay, well, we got August football, preseason football coming up. And, Jeff, I know you have a special for folks to get aboard with Las Vegas Sports Services.
Yeah, you're going to get 4 weeks of NFL preseason, the entire preseason, actually. 5-star players edge winners, all for a total of $19. Just call LVSS at 1-866-575-8916. This is the best time to get the best prices. The prices go up as you get close to the season. So call LVSS 1-866-575-8916. Get the entire preseason, all the 5-star players edge winners for just $19.
All right, and Jim Feist has a special, too. August football approaching. You get 4 weeks with Jim, including his preseason game of the year. $29, 1-866-841-1655. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Football is right around the corner. Make sure you check out more college football and NFL previews right here at jimfeist.tv. Thanks for joining us, and good luck with the games, everyone.